Welcome everybody here in Pakhuis de Zwijger for Design Digger Live, edition number 10 already, which is quite a lot if you imagine that we started just before the first lockdown, so that's almost more than 1.5 years ago. So that long we're already dealing with the COVID. There's a limited audience here tonight in the Pakhuis, but they're open. They are open, and we're here tonight for a special edition of Design Digger Live. Tonight, we as Design Digger are teaming up with the creative funds, funds for the creative industries funds. I'm used to saying the Stimuleringsfonds for the creative industries, so it's kind of a puzzle, but we're there, the creative funds, creative industries funds. We're teaming up with a special on talent. And you may ask, why talent? There are lots of reasons for it. First of all, young designers are more lenient in the way they cope with urgent, pressing societal problems. They tend to experiment a little bit more, they're flexible, they are inventing their own practice, so they can react very fast to these problems. The last 7 years, the Creative Industries Funds has been developing young talents with a grant yearly, so they can focus totally on their own practice. The last 7 years were also years of crisis. We've seen the remnants of an economic crisis. There's, of course, a political crisis, just mentioning Cambridge Analytics. There's a social crisis. I'm referring to Me Too, Black Lives Matters, inequality. There's a health crisis, of course. I don't have to mention about that. All these problems are addressed by young designers. They each do that in their own way. The last half year on designdigger.nl, a couple of long reads have been published on these 7 years of talent development. And this evening is sort of a roundup and is loosely organized around 3 of the long reads. And that is Me and My Practice, Me and the World, and Me and the Other. I won't be explaining too much about it. Just hang on and you will learn everything about it. You also probably mentioned that this edition is in English. That's because at the table tonight we're going to have Germans, we're going to have Swiss people from France, people from also a little bit from the Netherlands, there are people from Germany, Italy, all over Europe, and what binds us, that is, after all, the English language. Also special tonight is that I have a co-host, and I'm very happy to welcome you here, Janice Dale. Janice, welcome here at the table. You are well, it's my words, so you don't have to agree with it, but I'd say you're one of the most important spokeswomen on inclusion and diversity here in the Netherlands. You've done an exhibition 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, about...
This year.
This year?
This year. Only this year, yes.
With these COVID times, your whole perception of times gets mixed up. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the exhibition? What was it about?
Yeah, the exhibition was called Voices of Fashion, and the subtitle was Black Culture, Beauty and Style. It was, let's say, a celebration of Black gorgeousness and fabulousness and creativity also. But on the other hand, it was also meant as let's say, an eye-opener for both the public and the creative and the arts industry field to realize that, how should I put that? Well, that the colonial past still has its influences on nowadays life, even when it comes to concepts like fashion and beauty.
And design, of course.
And design, obviously.
That's why you're also here to hear your view on how design can cope with the new times of inclusivity. You also have the platform Diversity Rules. Can you tell us a little bit what that is about?
Yeah, I founded it in 2014, I guess. I think it was a month before I did my TED Talk on the power of fashion. And that's the message, the mission I have, and I try to communicate to the world. Use the power of fashion initially, but also arts, beauty and creativity, media, and so on. All those good things in life.
Yep.
To make society more inclusive and more inspiring and a better place for all of us, so to say. So I started this platform, and the aim is not only showing that, how it can be done, how you can make, let's say, a magazine or a collection in a truly inclusive way, but also to educate the public and hopefully to stimulate that people in between themselves will engage in this conversation and they will educate themselves. So it's not up to me, in my point of view, to educate people. I hope we can all educate ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're just showing us where to look at and how to engage with that. You're on the monitoring committee of the Council of Culture and in the committee of transgressive behavior. So you're sort of ethically, you're all over the place. Can you tell me what this is about, transgressive behavior, this platform?
Yeah, well, maybe I can explain firstly. Because all what I do is in the name of activism. I call myself a fashion activist, and all the activities I enroll are related to that. Whether I write, whether I speak, whether I'm writing this book or co-curating this exhibition, but also being on committees is part of my activism. And I must admit that it's not my most favorite part.
Sitting in meetings?
Not really. But this committee is really important because our aim is not to investigate whether or not there is a problem within about safety within the creative industry, because we already know that. I guess we all know that the problem is rather big. So we don't have to waste time to investigate something where we all know what the outcome is. But what we are going to do is give the industry, ourselves and schools and so on, creative, constructive, practical tools to make the creative climate better.
Inclusive
and safe,
and better.
Yeah.
And by that also, I think, more creative and more urgent and, better in one word.
Yeah.
Okay. You're the co-host. You can break in at any time in any conversation you feel like.
I will.
I'll engage you in the conversation as well. Good to have you here, Janice.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Like I mentioned, it's 3 teams. The evening will be hacked up in 3 teams, and then say roughly 9:15. We will have a drink, not here because the bar downstairs will be closed, but we're going to have a drink. You will have a drink at home as well. Maybe you're watching it in the morning, you can have a coffee. While you're watching at home, you can ask questions as well. The people in the audience can ask questions as well. For that, we have, as you can see on the screen, the menti.com. You can go there and use the code 95151260. I'm not going to repeat. I'm not going to repeat that. No. I have an iPad here, and if you send me the question, I read it here, and I'll put it on the table, and it will probably be answered. Like I said, 3 blocks. The first block is me and my practice. I mentioned before that every year it started with roughly 25 talents back in the day in 2014. And now it's, I think, roughly 40 talents each year get a substantial amount of money so they can free their time and free their mind to work freely on their practice. So I'd say me and my practice is the first subject to start the conversation. And 2 talents are here at the table. On my left, for the viewers at home, I've been wanting to say that for such a long time. On my right is Roos Meerman. On my right, and for you at home, on the left, is Audrey Large. Audrey, to start with you, this year, at the Dutch Design Week, you were you were nominated, and then you were awarded the best young talent. Can you tell us what is your line of work? Why the work that you make? Why were you elected as best talent? Well, just tell us about the work.
So I'm an object designer, and I graduated from the Design Academy in 2017. And after, I went on with my research, and it was clear for me that I wanted to work independently. And I work as an object designer. My practice responds to the exponential digitization of our everyday surrounding. And I would say that in my work, I mainly look at digital image processes and how images are fabricated in order to bridge them with digital fabrication and reconsider our way to design and think our material surroundings. And so, like you can see on the screens, for this kind of project, I would use the computer and 3D modeling space.
Just hang on 1 second. What we see here on screen, is that a 3D printed object, or is this a computer rendering? Because that I find the fascinating part of your work. It's very hard to tell apart.
This is a 3D model, and I firstly work with images, and I produce images in the computer that I would say that I craft 3D files, and in a later stage of my work, I would materialize these 3D files by 3D printing.
You use a 3D printer. Do you have a 3D printer yourself, or is this produced in a very expensive high-tech lab?
No, I do everything myself.
You print this in your own studio?
Yeah. So after school, I bought my first 3D printer, and I think, from that moment I could start to experiment with the machines and to try to, for obvious reasons, it's way less expensive to do it yourself than to go through companies. And as well, I could start to materialize some improper files and to find, some impossible shapes to make, let's say. So in that sense, I always try to push further digital fabrication and manufacturing.
Okay.
So that's what you want to do, make the impossible possible, or not?
I think this is part of it, but I would say that in the first place, I always try to look at what would be the object properties of an image, the material properties of an image, and what would be the image properties of an object. And by bridging digital field with digital manufacturing, you can start to challenge our perception of materiality. Maybe when the viewer encounter my objects, there is this moment where what's real is blurred and the tangible objects become multiple. And in that sense, it's more a way of thinking matter in a fluid way, let's say. The objects are firstly a file, and then they cross the skin of the computer and they materialize. And I have this very fluid methodology where I draw, I 3D print, I 3D model, and each object or each image is an iteration and build up on each other. So it's more about challenging our perception of the real.
Intriguing.
Yeah, it's sort of a blur between the analog and the digital, the physical and the digital, online and offline as well, I think, which is you see a lot now in the whole of society. That's also your purpose, to sort of blur between digital and analog. What we see, we're wearing face filters at the same time.
Let's say that in my process, this is very much integrated. So I'm not highlighting that. It's more that, this is happening in everyday life. And in that sense, we are, in a way, becoming these images that are manipulated. our surroundings are manipulated as we create movies with visual effects, for example. And maybe it's time to rethink our way to produce and design matter by looking at processes that are applied for images and to bridge them with object design practices. So this is not what I try to highlight. It's more, it's very integrated in my work. I produce as much images as objects, and for me the dichotomy of it is not relevant anymore.
And they go one-on-one? Each image, there's only one object?
No, it's not really. It's more, I'm always fascinated by the potentiality of becoming of a file. And there's an infinite possibility of materialization of 3D files. And they don't all need to happen. At some point I choose, I make one iteration material, but it could be more, it could be different scale, it could be on an architectural level, it could be on a very small scale too. But this is all contained in the 3D file, and this potentiality of becoming is very interesting to me.
This is just a starting point. There's one thing I'd like to know. You said you have your own 3D printer. You have one or you have multiple?
I have 11.
11? Wow. I guess they're not all as big as this table and high-tech and very expensive. Can you elaborate just a little on how you succeed in making these objects so digitally perfect? Print them so digitally perfect?
I mean, it's 3D printing is a lot of there's big communities on internet, and there is a lot of knowledge that is shared and democratized. And as much as I learned how to 3D model by myself online, I learned how to handle a 3D printer myself online as well. Firstly I spend a lot of time making the file, and then I materialize it with this material that is PLA, but that has this kind of iridescent finish, and so there is no post-processing or coating on the objects. It's really kind of coming out of the machine with that finish, which I think it's interesting in a way that there's this one-to-one translation from the computer to the material realm, let's say. And of course I play a lot with iridescence, how the objects at some point become virtual, like ungraspable almost. And the idea of multiplicity is enhanced by the iridescence in a way that when you turn around, the object is always revealing itself to the eyes of the viewer. And in the same way, the iridescence is kind of hiding the layers of the 3D printing, and it almost become like an illusion. The process doesn't reveal itself, let's say.
Okay. Janice, you have a strong background in fashion.
Yeah.
Is there like something comparable with this within fashion? The blurring of on and offline and digital and analog techniques?
Well, you see a lot of young designers using digital dresses, so to say. There are not really garments, but they're only existing on the screen. And also digital models, obviously, and digital influencers. So we see a taking over of the digital reality, sort of, almost. And I was wondering, where do you draw the line between, let's say, this may be a kind of old school question, the line between, let's say, art and technique, or art or craft and technique. You know what I mean? How do you see what you do? Are you an artist?
I mean, it's...
In my point of view, you are.
I mean, I always say that I'm an object designer because it's as I'm trained, and it's mainly where I intervene. But I think this point of view of what I am making is very much different depending on the context I intervene, because I have as well a lot of questions about craft, and in certain fields, this wouldn't be recognized as craft, while in others, it would be very much like tech craft. And I don't. It doesn't matter too much about categories to me.
I find it very interesting. I think that's also something of the last 6-7 years that you see that designers, they're taking different roles. They can act as a journalist, they can act as a designer, as an artist, as a performer, as an installation maker, all sorts of different roles. I
always use function. There's always a recognizable function in the work I do, because I like to create tension in between this almost abstract, surreal feeling of the artifact, but at the same time, maybe we cannot describe what we see, but we can name it, because ultimately it's going to be a vase, it's going to be a shelf, and I like to create confrontation in between what we know about what is a table and what we are actually looking at. And in that sense, I think it's very much object design, a way of thinking, but as practice is very much linked to my own visual language and how I express myself, and using the computer as a space of freedom. And as I work independently, maybe could look like an artistic practice, but I don't make the line between craft and art and design in general, I would say.
I found the word that you used, intriguing. I think that really says it all.
Yeah.
Also at the table here is Roos Meerman. You graduated in 2014. Also with a 3D printed objects. They looked quite differently. Can you, there will be an image on shortly. Can you explain how you worked with 3D printing? That's already like 7 years ago. So
yeah, it's a long time ago.
You had to reel it yourself, the 3D printer?
I didn't remember the project again. And now it's actually quite, there are some similarities in the way we worked with 3D printing, because I also played with the fact that to find a handwriting in 3D printing, actually. So I came up with a technique where you can inflate 3D printed shapes with. So you start with a small balloon, you heat it up in hot water, and then you can inflate it by using cold air. And the goal was to make this very strict, predictable technology where you make a digital file and you know exactly what, if everything goes well, what comes out of the 3D printer. Yeah. But how can you make different properties or possibilities with this 3D printer?
Yeah. That was 7 years ago, your project. You even won the material award with it. Or
the fellowship.
The fellowship, so the Young Achieving Young Designer fellowship for the materiality of your objects. One of your last projects I saw this year at the Dutch Design Week was a sort of a landscape. It was a scale model of a landscape that will dissolve during time. So it was a huge landscape architectural piece. So your me and my practice, I think your practice has made some diversions, some side turns and everything in the last 7 years. Yeah. Could you take us along one of the steps that you made in your studio?
What is the most? I graduated with a technique, and for me it was quite searching for, and also I did that with the talent development fund. Yep. Thinking about what exactly am I doing as a designer, and how can I start my practice with designing? And when graduating with a technique, you have a few directions where you can choose of. So making a product that you can sell, or using the method you are using in another way to come up with something new, or you as a maker can do other projects.
Yeah.
So I was thinking in these directions, and I've tried a lot of different, as you say, different directions.
You did a lot of collaborations as well.
A lot
right?
of collaborations, yeah.
Yeah.
This is Tom. I now have I own this studio, Philips Studios, together with him.
Okay.
And we have a team of.
So Roos Meerman doesn't exist
anymore. No.
as a designer.
Well, I'm a person still, but
of course,
not
but
as a
an
studio.
entity.
And not as an entity. That's true. Yeah. So we work now in a team of with 9 people. So we're quite can do a lot. So we collaborate a lot. We do artistic concepts for companies and institutions, but we also do design research. So that's, so to say, the method I developed further, and also trying to do that with other projects, but also in the lab that we came up with last year. We came up with PyLab, and that's a lab where we work together with artists, designers, but also scientists and engineers, and we really want to research the possibilities that you can come up with these different directions.
I saw also this year at the Dutch Design Week, if I'm correct, a collaboration you did with the medical team with a hospital in the Netherlands, where stands, like these little tubes, were put into the body for medical use, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the projects you did with the PyLab?
Yeah, that's one of the 2 projects I do with PyLab, and that's it started by working together with a professor, Kees Storm, and Wouter Ellenbroek, who are researching randomly generated patterns, auxetic patterns. I believe there's coming up a video about this in a minute. And these patterns, they've been generated, so a field of dots, here you see it,
there they are
connected or not connected, and then in a computer program, these structures are stretched out, and they've been optimized to be more auxetic or less auxetic. And auxetic is...
yes, please explain, because everybody's at the table like,
What? Auxetic is a structure with a negative Poisson ratio. Yeah, then
okay, before we get to what do we use it for? What is the purpose of it? Why do we need designers in this field?
Because you can make properties in materials that you can to use materials in a different way. So auxetic structures are structures that you can normally you stretch a material and it gets longer. When it gets longer, it gets smaller, thinner.
Yeah.
But auxetic structures, you pull them and they get larger in width. So they have they react on a strange way. And they showed us these strange moving structures, and we've been thinking with them, what can we do with this? So next to the property that it's moving in a very beautiful and intriguing way, it has this property of when you stretch it, it becomes larger. So you can use that in textiles, but also in architecture and in stands for the human body.
Yeah, exactly.
And because this is randomly generated, you can make patterns that you cannot design by yourself as a designer. So they appear like nature. It exists and it appears. So that's what we really liked about this.
Yeah, so it's very much a research-driven practice you have as well.
Yeah, it's
collaborations, research.
Yeah.
Audrey, could you imagine also working with scientists, mathematics? I don't know, maybe even a medical device or something like that?
Okay.
You can say no if you don't.
No, I mean, it's not something that I would exclude. I mean, mainly I would like to work with, in the future I wouldn't like to go on producing myself, like working with people that, whether it's 3D printing or other means to translate files into the material realms, it could be other kind of robotic or machineries. So people that would work with industry or that would have like big facilities. But Yeah, I mean, my practice is not really solution-orientated, but there are knowledge in these scientific fields that are so much valuable as well for the creative fields, and it's not something I exclude, but I wouldn't, I don't know. It needs to be approached seriously, I would say.
You don't feel like an urgent urge to work with other disciplines?
No. In the sense that I mean, I get inspired and I research way more into cinema and image theory than about object design. So in that sense, it's already a lot about CGI and in between fields what I do with my practice. But I don't. Is right now in where I am is not an urge to go in collaboration with many other fields, but.
Which sort of makes sense. Your work is very autonomous.
Yeah.
It's very much you who makes the work and who does the creation and even the fabrication.
Yeah. It's very linked to... I mean, I have as well different kind of project, but for a project like this where I use the computer not as a tool to simulate the real, but as... the software is not creating the shape. I make them myself. So it's very linked to my own experience and my own visual language in that sense.
Maybe you winning this wonderful prize. Congrats again.
Thank you.
Is this let's say a burden or a blessing? I can imagine that it limits your creativity or so.
No,
not yet.
And
how about you, Roos? Because it's longer ago for you.
I had some difficulties because I felt the pressure of. That I had to come up with this at the same level of ideas when I presented a new project. So I had some I felt the pressure. So I can imagine that.
I think for us, the people that received the grant at the moment of the COVID as well, it took a kind of different meaning in a way that we all had to reconsider as well the people that didn't have the grant at that moment, but everybody, we had to reconsider what we are doing with our time and what's the meaning of it. So I think in a sense it helped me to don't rush into things and to take time to develop. And then of course we all have our own anxieties and pressure around creativity is always kind of hard. But to me, it was like a chance to have this grant because it just helped me to go on with my work in a very pragmatic way as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Well, talking about creativity, it looks like the sky is the limit, as they say. And I was wondering, Roos, you mentioned the disciplines and people you collaborated with. Do you also work with, let's say, ethics or philosophers? Or do you think that's not your cup of tea?
We worked with a philosopher once. What we did with her is making a residency project where we invited all kind of alumni and students to work on different subjects, and a philosopher was in that sense a really good way to guide these processes and to ask questions about what their project meant and these kind of things. Is that an answer to your question?
Well, we have to round up because there are two more themes to be covered. One concluding question to the both of you. You mentioned architectural scale. Do you have? Let me elaborate a little bit on that. Do you have like do you see yourself creating architecture or architectural scale kind of objects?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not let's finish like this.
That sounds intriguing, right?
Once again.
Exactly. Zaha did eat your heart out.
We're waiting.
Yeah. Roos, for you, what is going to be your next thing you're working on? You started out with these material sort of objects of which the function wasn't clear yet. You worked with medical services. You had these scale models of landscapes that sort of erode, that are taken over by nature. Do you have like a new interesting viewpoint that you're going to focus on?
I think the focus is mainly on developing all these ideas further to apply it in a bigger scale.
Okay.
So yeah, these sculptures that you were talking about, we want to do that in a 3 by 3 meter scale in an environment on the Veluwe, for example. And
okay, in the nature, in real nature, so they're not in an urban context.
No.
Okay. Yeah, well, real nature. We're in Holland, of course. We don't have that much real nature, but they're not in cities.
No, it's the case that we want to the nitrogen. We want to. There's a lot of chalk inside this material. It's material made or a paste made from sewage waste, and there's a lot of chalk in it. And we want to dissolve that in nature for nitrogen deposition to how to say that. Not to happen.
Yeah, okay, so it's sort of cleaning the environment.
Cleaning the environment and make it more biodiverse by using waste.
Okay.
Yeah.
Audrey, Rose, thank you so much for joining us here at the table. Two beautiful projects, and you can see that it's nice to see, Janice, where 3D printing can take you. It can take you to the art world, or it can even take you by a small U-turn into the human body. So all these different takes that designers have with one technique. And
can't wait to see what the future has in store for the two of you.
All right. Thank you, Rose and Audrey. Also, there are two other guests are preparing to come to the table now. I'll introduce them. Yes, of course. The next guest I'd like to invite is Martina Hein and Jonas Althaus. Together they're Cream on Chrome. And also I'd like to invite on stage Irene Stracuzzi. Did I pronounce that right? Yeah, I really put an effort to it. Welcome at the table. You were both in the theme I described as me in the world. And it means that how designers look at the world. The other two, Audrey and Rose, they were focusing on their own practice. How do I work? Which materials do I use? How can I go from 3D printing to new directions? How can I take 3D printing into maybe architectural skills? Of course, they look at the world as well, but I have the impression that your view is more on the outside world. Irene, you graduated with a project on the borders of the Arctic
Ocean?
Arctic territories, exactly.
Yeah.
What is the project called?
The legal status of ice was a project.
So what is the legal status of ice?
Exactly, that was the question, because basically it's the ocean, the Arctic Ocean was and still is disputed by different countries that border it. So I wanted to show this dispute through different data, especially geographic data, to make sense of the dispute in a way that would be very data-oriented. And by projecting this data on a 3D model of the Arctic that I made, I wanted to let the viewer create their own understanding of the dispute based on factual information. And then the way I kind of order this data creates a sort of storytelling. It's a storytelling way of showing the dispute. So it's, for me, it was a kind of journalistic approach, but translated not in text, but in a three-dimensional installation.
In installation, yeah. So actually, while we think the whole world is slowly decolonializing, the Arctic
very slowly.
Very slowly, exactly. No, exactly. But it's an ongoing process. But at the same time, we see in the Arctic world, there's actually a whole process of colonization going on.
Mm-hmm. And for me, it was interesting because, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to make borders on water. So the dispute is very much a cartographic endeavor, a cartographic dispute. And as a graphic designer, it's interesting to see how visualizations, especially maps, shape our perception of space. So that's why I approach it also as a graphic designer.
This project, where is it on show? If you make a project like that, you graduate with it and you have the installation. So what's then the next?
Well, I was lucky to exhibit it in a few exhibitions because it has a kind of, well, it's interesting from a political point of view, but also from a climate change point of view. Because obviously the ocean is getting ice-free every year more and more, so this leaves the opportunity for shipping routes being used. So I think this kind of more connection towards climate change was something that made the project really stand out and be included in more exhibitions, because I think designers today really are, and me as well, really interested in showing more the climate change side of,
Now you talk about climate change, and I myself prefer talking about the climate crisis, because when we say climate change, we are maybe entitled to think that it happens in itself. But when saying it's a crisis, you emphasize the fact that it's really an emergency and that we people are that it's our fault. So. A small addition.
Yeah, I mean, I have a more scientific outlook on it. So for me, it's a more humanitarian way of putting it. If you say crisis, I think it's like both. Yeah, it's.
You could say biased as well. I wouldn't say biased, but it's less. At least you try to be subjective.
Yeah.
As a journalist.
Yeah, I think
you mentioned it's a journalistic project, right?
Yes, it's very subjective. So what I try to show in my project is also the subjectivity of choosing data, choosing specific data sets, choosing the way to visualize them, because nothing is really objective.
No.
And that's where,
Janice, you were immediately on when I just mentioned the word colonialization and decolonization. Do you think projects like these also have a purpose in that perspective, showing that there's still colonization going on? This is, although this being territorial?
I think you're the one to answer that question, because I find it really difficult to grasp what you are doing, to be honest.
Okay, so well, you explain that, right? Their disputes on who owns the Arctic.
Visible now, so it's about showing geographic data that relates to the dispute, and it's very much a colonization endeavor, I would say.
And they're about the minerals or the oil?
Yeah, it's about owning the seabed, because you cannot own water, but you can own the seabed, and the seabed hides a lot of oil and gas, and it's actually going to be the next hotspot for the last remaining oil and gas on Earth. So that's why it's very valuable to own as much seabed in the Arctic Ocean as possible.
So this is a really cool and fabulous way to address the topic of climate.
Exactly,
climate crisis.
Yeah, I think information is very, like the way data usually is presented requires a very intellectual approach. And I still think my projects require an analytical intellectual approach, but by making them into an installation, I want to also engage the audience in a different way. So also to grasp the dimension of things, and that you can look at things from a different perspective. So that's why also this model, for example, is round, because I wanted people to approach it from different geographical points of view, because we're used to seeing the Earth from the same kind of cartographic projection where Europe is in the center and all these things. And in this way, I wanted also to show that you can see geography in a different way, according to the point of view.
So I'd say you have your eye definitely on the world.
Yeah.
Here at the other side of the table, Martina, Jonas, you also have your eye on the world. Can you? Yeah, you do. Yeah. Don't be too. Could you tell us what your Irene's very strongly views on territorial dispute and journalistic approach? How do you approach? What is your focus on which societal problems or crisis, one might say? What is your focus and how do you address it?
Yeah, I think we don't necessarily have a focus in topic, maybe more in approach how to bring that to audiences, but we're also experimenting with that a lot. We like that a lot. In the past, we've addressed topics like migration, more specifically from a European perspective, but also trying to bring in non-European perspective.
In what way did you do that?
So in general, I think maybe as an introduction to our practice, we sort of do social and experience design in which we look at these type of topics. So for instance, in this case, migration. And similar to Irene, we also try to engage an audience, but with an interactive experience. So what you see on the screen is a project called 4D News. It's a kind of newsroom that lets you travel across time. So we know there are a lot of news stories that are building up. This is the conflict in Syria. There are a lot of different events, like the rebels coming in, this is happening, but what we focused on was specifically how the reporting changed, how the framing changed. And that is quite interesting if you look at it. So this are collections of reports that are representative to the imagery and language you see about the city of Aleppo in the different years as portrayed by Dutch newspapers. So it's this kind of view, but here you see, for instance, with this, so the arrow is a sort of a timeline scroll, huh?
Yeah.
How this article updates also across time. So this is about the Syrian refugee politics in Germany.
And how that was perceived through the sentence, wir schaffen das, or we can do this, that became famous all over the world, basically, as a label almost.
So what you do is actually you have a critical view on journalism, on the news reporting, on actual events.
Yeah, so that's with this project, and also kind of showing the meta-narrative that if you just read the day-to-day news, you miss out on that picture, because once you zoom out, you kind of see how quickly the tone of voice is changing from 2015 to 2016, how the messages completely flip. Even just the sentence, we can do this, the words remained exactly the same in these 3 years from 2015 to 18. But the meaning changed completely from we as Europe can kind of handle the situation together, take up a few refugees and help them, to, oh, I think Germany is going to do it. Oh no, Merkel is going to do this. I think the citizens should just, help more. And up to the point where the sentence, can we do this, meant more like, can Germany's economy integrate these people into the labor market? It's a very different question. And that changed in just 3 years.
Your installations are very much interactive, right? I remember, sorry, Jonas, but you graduated with the Basic Income Cafe, which was like a setting of a cafe with coffee so people can experience what the basic income is all about. Why did you choose to engage so much with the public? That usually designers, they create something and you can pick it up, you can buy it, or you can look at it, but you really engage with the audience.
Should I take this? Or do you?
Well, it's also, you should talk about Basic Income Cafe, but...
in general, the other projects as well. These projects
relates
also
to what Janice mentioned before. I think it's really important that we don't necessarily want to educate. That's not our role, and we also cannot do it. It's really the interactivity for us is important in order to engage people, to make people curious for viewpoints, to become explorers and to become active in reaching out for information instead of just like pushing it on them. So we really try to come up with things that make people active in these shows, exhibitions, formats.
Yeah. And it kind of helps to have this little surprise moment when you move something physical and then something digital happens, or the other way around. There's this little moment that draws people in, and they're like, oh, or like coffee is pouring for me, oh. And then you slowly get the interest, and then you like talk to them a little bit more.
Okay, so the physical presence of you two is also important, or not necessarily?
I think sometimes the work also does something performative.
Yeah.
By performing based on or reacting to your actions. But as you can see on the screen, we've also tried to literally bring in more performative elements and so this is a court case situation. So it's a performance where people witnessed the case of the earthbound creatures against globalization. And the audience was there also kind of as the grand jury, and they could vote in the meantime that they heard us as lawyers speak for or against what globalization did, and in that sense influenced the course of the court case.
And what was the accusation?
That globalization stole the future.
Okay, so it's quite
So
a
it's kind of
sentence,
heavy,
huh?
yeah.
So your projects are they're never finished. They're ongoing, right? Like the German thing, the miracle thing. Where can we see, or how can we take part of it? Can we? I want to.
You can actually visit the 4D News exhibition in Hamburg at the moment, at the Kunstgewerbemuseum. But yeah, it's true. We are we like these outputs that take place in a museum. It's an interesting space to explore possibilities. But we're also working on a more implemented software that would help researchers and journalists to engage with news archives in a similar lens, maybe, of looking at sort of a discourse analysis of journalism or news media. So yeah, you can also visit it through this page.
Yeah.
It's called Newslider. Yeah.
Thanks. So in fact, you also are kind of, let's say, design activists, or not?
Yeah. Irene, are you a design activist?
In a way, but then also like, all kinds of journalists would also be called activists, I think. Maybe it's the topic we are interested in that may call for a sort of activist approach, but I don't think the way if I were a real activist, I wouldn't do these projects. I would be more bold and more out there, and actually I want to engage the audience in a more careful investigation that actually takes a bit more time. So yeah, maybe in that sense it's not really close to traditional activism, but could have an element of it.
I think it's called artivism, isn't it? I like the word artivism.
Oh wow, yeah, never heard of it.
Design
Beautiful.
artivists.
Yeah. Well, I was also wondering, Irene, you were trained as a graphic designer, right? Just earlier on, I saw this huge, big globe. I think it was on show in the...
At the Van Abbe Museum in
exactly,
Eindhoven.
during the Dutch Design Week. Why did you choose to go from the 2D, whether it's a screen or a print, to the installation? Why did you make that switch?
Well, actually,
there it is.
if you look at all my projects, they kind of have this graphic layer that then I try to translate in a three-dimensional way. Because I am a graphic designer. I still work as a graphic designer.
You still work as a graphic designer?
Yeah, so that's my way of creating 3D work. And in this case, I really wanted to, because this exhibition was about Alibaba, I wanted to use Alibaba itself as a platform to produce my own project. So this globe was actually produced through the platform itself, and I found it interesting to have something that could be shipped quite easily, because when it's deflated, this globe is pretty small. It's just like one cardboard box. And then it becomes this huge 4-meter installation where you can see all kinds of data relating to the platform itself from where it was produced. So it's kind of a meta take on...
But do you choose, like, okay, I'm doing this research, I'm doing this project, here is a more graphic print or screen design in order, or no, this should be an installation? Or how do you make that?
Well, actually, I think about the three-dimensionality of it first, and then I see how I can apply information visualization and graphic design later, which is maybe unexpected if you look at the work. But yeah,
okay.
I try to think of space first. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the word artivism, but engaging with the world is sort of the core of your practice as well, Jonas and Martina. And how do you choose your subjects? Or they just come to you, they call you?
Yeah, sometimes they also call. But yeah, there's so many things these days that we feel need to be addressed, and it's already happening a lot with the crises are being picked up by younger generations, like climate change or climate justice. But yeah, really, we feel if there's an angle to one of these urgent topics that we see clearly, we will do it. It's really more about if we see our practices benefiting this discourse, or.
But is it more from frustration that drives you, or fascination on the basis you choose your projects?
I think they are not excludable.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah, but in the case of Wir schaffen das, it was definitely frustration, because we saw like newspapers printing anniversary, 10 months since Wir schaffen das, or 1 year after Wir schaffen das, and every time the meaning changed. So we said that we need to bring this out there to show people that you cannot judge everything according to these words. But
Yeah, it was also at,
No, please. Yeah,
it was also at the time where we were like, I think it was 2018 or 19, and we were like, we almost forgot that there used to be photos of Angela Merkel taking selfies with refugees coming in, or that people were applauded at Munich train station, and that's how quickly the sentiments changed. And how come we don't remember this? So that's also. So sometimes it's a frustration, but then we're like, but why? And then curious.
Okay, then it starts. Start ticking the box and you start to investigate. For you, Irene, is it more like the frustration or the fascination that makes you pick a topic?
For me, it's about, because I like to work on things I don't understand. So by working on specific topics, then I also make sense for myself first and then for the audience. But in general, I'm drawn to more scientific, geopolitical, climate crisis related topics. Because I like science in general, and I think that it's quite complicated for people to understand. So I want to give my own contribution to that.
Ordering
and
the
first I order for myself, and I'm like, okay, I get it, and then I can explain it to the audience.
Okay. Last question for you both at the table. Of course, last year was a COVID year. You just finished the talent development. How did it influence you, Irene? The COVID year, then because you get a whole year, you get quite a sum of money to work a whole year on research, and whether it be on world, on like big topics in the world, or on your own practice. But then all of a sudden you cannot go abroad, you cannot travel, you can do. How did you meet up with experts? How did it influence you?
It was a big shift, especially like not being able to show work in different places as I was used to the year before. But on the other hand, it kind of helped me to connect with more people than I would have, because this kind of online conference tool became normalized, and then you also get less anxious about reaching out to people that are really far away, because then it becomes just a normal thing to do. So in a different sense, it was quite positive to reach out more scientists, more people, and
Me in the smaller world, so
exactly.
to say.
Me and the computer.
You guys, how did it work out? Having this year in the COVID year.
Yeah, it was also very much reorientation. We had one project planned to do in Hong Kong, where we wanted to research streams of non-human streams in the city that we could obviously not do abroad. So we did it in Rotterdam, where we live, which makes a lot of sense also to, retrospectively makes a lot of sense to kind of also focus again on what is happening in my backyard.
Exactly,
instead of
the backyard.
Going outside there all of a sudden. And on the other hand, so that was a very positive experience, collaborating with urbanists and urban ecologists in Rotterdam. On the other hand, we discovered for our studio like hybrid formats and hybrid media really as something that defines us now, like as a strength. We get a lot of commissions through that. So that was so much asked, and that was such a thing that needed to be reinvented in these days, that really was a discovery for us. So the crisis shaped us, definitely.
Okay, that's good to see that designers, they don't see a crisis, they see a challenge, they see an opportunity.
And what I really like about designers and creatives and so on is that they helped us all to deal with this new reality by creating really cool stuff for, let's say, lockdown lifestyle or so. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, both of you. Thank you. We're teaming up. We're getting there. There's one more theme still to be covered, and I think it's especially a theme that's about today. Yeah, please join us, René Mes and Gabriel Fontana. You were working in a theme I called Me and the Other, and I think that's self-explaining in a way. Designers look at the world, or designers look at their own practice, but there are also designers who look at the other, and the other has become a big focus the last years, slowly, very slowly. But still there is a new awareness. For example, Black Lives Matter, also Me Too. You engage with these themes. To start with you, René, and in what way do you engage with the other as a designer?
Already since studying at Design Academy as well, I focused on telling stories from a queer perspective. So already during the academy, I switched from more interior-focused projects to Men and Leisure, which is a more social design department. And then after graduating from Design Academy, I sort of fell into film for a project called Anno, where we used film to create more representation for younger, queer, mainly lesbian girls who don't have a lot of representation in Dutch media and TV. And now with that was in 2017, and now with the fund, I'm portraying my own chosen family, my own queer friends, who are mainly of color and having a bicultural background.
Okay.
So I'm just telling their stories. Yeah.
Do you? What's your take on that? Is there enough representation within design of these groups you mentioned?
I think there's more coming. I felt like during the Design Academy time, there was almost nothing to none. Other Gabriel was sort of the first one from the
Gabriel
masters.
Maher.
Yes, they were sort of the first one to use their practice to tell their stories and queer stories. And during our graduation in 2016, there was also the first time the Academy saw that there was a sort of a change going on, and then we also had a first panel talk about queer theory within design. And I think in that time it slowly came, and you are also one of the people. So I think it's coming more and more, for sure. But when I started design, I didn't see the possibility to do it. No.
For you, Gabriel, how do you engage with the other, and in your case also queer?
I think, first of all, before to engage with the other, I try to first reflect on what is my own position, and try to locate my work as a white man coming from like a middle-class families. I've been educated in Western design school for my bachelor and master, and reflecting on how this specific embodied position in the world will affect also the way of how I design in general, before starting to like engage with others. But then as a social designer and educator, I would say specialized in developing some kind of games and physical activities and collective experience that made people think and reflect about different social norms. So as we can see,
this is
on this picture,
again an intriguing image.
Yeah. So this is a game multiform that I developed. Before COVID, during 2 years, I worked directly with Rotterdam-based primary and secondary school, the philosopher Nathania van den Heuvel, and the sport teachers, in the idea to develop alternative queer sport games for physical education class. So in the idea of like rethinking sport from a queer and feminist perspective.
Okay, but how does it work, the game? Can you elaborate a little bit, just a little bit on?
Yeah, today I didn't bring the video. Usually I always show like the 2-minute self-explanatory video, but just to say
okay, you've got 1 minute
just to say
now.
like a few words. I develop games around the notion of like fluid identities. So like whether games where the players have to change teams during the games. Here it works through this transformable sport outfit that I design that change color through the game. So each time a new color appears, players change groups. This is one example.
Janice, this is of course very much your territory as well. What is your view on design and the inclusivity in design?
Well, as in many of these kind of topics, I always say we are making steps, but there's only baby steps. Baby steps are being made. We still have a long way to go because we're only at the beginning. It looks like we're only at the beginning, and that's why I'm really happy with this generation of designers, because at this point in the discussion, I think the change will have to come from you and all of you, the new kids on the block. You are, what I said before, also a kind of activist who can change the future and who can change the industry. And I was wondering if you're in schools, you are stimulated to think about making that change, not only within your discipline, but also at the school and also within the whole fashion or creative or design industry, because we all know that that system is totally outdated and that it really needs to be decolonized and to decentralized. And what my frustration is also that in schools you are not being taught to challenge the system. You are being taught to be part of the system. And I was wondering how it felt for you.
Exactly. I see you nodding there, Renee. You've got the mic.
Well, I didn't really enjoy the culture at the Design Academy in that sense. I felt many times I wasn't understood as a queer person, and if I wanted to work on the themes around queer culture or identities, it was actually the people that I'm portraying in my project, my queer friends, who taught me to be more critical, and especially the people of color who teach me to be more critical to white people. So I think all the knowledge I have is from them and not from institutes at all. No.
Educate yourself, so to say.
Yeah,
even at a institute like the Design Academy?
Well, I think what I've heard, what I hope, there is a sort of a change going on, but I'm skeptical in that sense. But it's, I think, society in general, to be honest.
Yeah.
The baby steps, huh?
Yeah, and it's not only about decolonize art or design or beauty, but it's also about decolonize your mind and whole society. Everything and everyone needs to be decolonized.
Yep.
But I was thinking about you. Have you ever felt, or did you feel secure at your study? Were there teachers who you could relate to? Jesus. English.
I think I can relate as well to Renée's experience. I mean, and same like when I was at school, I think I looked a lot outside the academy in trying to find people who could give me feedback and so on. And yeah, I think it's also like really important to bring diversity in design school and in the staff itself, but also like in the references, both like in terms of practice and theories that are like brought to the students.
But in a way, if you look at the Design Academy, but I think it goes for all the other academies and the technical universities, where there's architecture and product design also being taught. It's an old phrase, you know, but you know, it used to be Oscars so wide, but design so wide. In your opinion, does that apply to the, if you look at the academies? And do you have an idea why that is, Gabriel?
I mean, you need to be privileged to be a designer in the first place, and especially if you want to
Why is that? Why?
start working as an independent. Like a lot of people, first of all, like don't have the means, whether like the financial means or educational or like cultural means to access design school. And even if you do after your graduation, if you want to start working as like by yourself, let's say, yeah, you need to have the privilege to do it, because often you're not paid for your hours, or you need to already have like some saving, or a lot of young graduates need to refund the money they borrow for their studies.
Yeah, that's part of the problem, but another part is also obviously the fact that when you are at the schools, it's difficult for people of color, students of color, to stay there because of the climate is so non-inclusive and, again, colonial. So that's what we were talking about, I think, but that we have to change the whole system, the whole climate, the whole industry in order to keep those talents, all those talents inside, and to make it possible that they also can thrive and survive.
Yeah, but also the value of aesthetics, non-Western
Obviously,
aesthetics.
yeah.
So that's also like because I don't remember one teacher of color at school, for example.
None.
No, isn't that also, you mentioned a lot
many
the
things.
financial part, but isn't it also about recognition? If you for example, you go to the open days of a school like that, and you see nobody who looks like you.
Yeah, you need to be able to mirror yourself.
I can imagine, exactly.
Yeah.
I can imagine it doesn't feel appealing to go there.
Yeah, and I think all those things will change when you are able to have a more diverse teacher community and a more inclusive curriculum. Also, the way that we consider what is fashion, who makes fashion, who is a designer, and who's a couturier, and who is just a street style designer, and it all has to do with decentralization, I think, and getting lost of that Eurocentrism that's also in a big thing in design and in fashion and everywhere. And we don't tend to see how a big part of our lives it is. And I think it's really harmful and also sorry, because we lose all kinds of talents.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You made the exhibition Voices of Fashion, and it's also.
Have you seen it or not?
Yes, I did.
God.
Yes.
And
I also bought the book. Yeah.
How wonderful was it?
I loved it. Yes. Also, especially the colors and everything. Yes.
Thank you.
It was really nice.
It is, of course, a celebration of blackness in fashion. In fashion, that is possible. I think to make an exhibition like that in design is probably very hard, because it's almost hard to find, to celebrate culture, other cultures than the Western cultures within design. Do you have an idea, Janice, how that can be changed?
Well, because we focus mainly on Europe and Northern America, all around the world design is being made, and we should also incorporate so-called other cultures within what we see and what we offer. And there's also the question, the issue of whitewashing, of people achieving things, and within history they don't get the credits of what they have done. So no one knows their names and their achievements. So there's so much more to explore, to give people the credit they deserve, I guess.
You are a designer, René. What do you, yeah, you are. Don't be shy. What do you see the role of design in achieving what Janice just said?
Well, for me, it's really important to tell stories, first of all. And my preference goes to telling queer stories as a queer person myself. And after working on Anno+, for example, for a few years, I really felt like I wanted to continue that, telling queer stories, but I also felt like it's not the time to tell queer stories of people who are white, because it's time
that story
for...
has been told already?
Yeah.
Not enough, but it has been told.
Everything still needs to be
Exactly.
extended. But
Let's make that clear.
let's make that clear. And since graduating, I met really lovely queer people in Utrecht, where I live. And they have taught me so much, and I've heard their stories, and I thought it's time to tell their stories instead of my story. So within this fund, I collaborated with them because it's also not up to me to design and tell their story. It's up to them.
So it's about collaborating and engaging very much.
Yeah, definitely. It's really our project.
Yeah.
So all 5 have like completely different cultural backgrounds, from the Suriname culture with a mixture with Jehovah's Getuigen to
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
To a girl from Morocco, a girl from Colombia, a guy from Afghanistan, and one Dutch guy. So it's a really lovely mixture of people and a really lovely collaboration.
And it's truly a joint venture.
Yes.
It's not your project, but it's...
It really feels like, we at every part of the project, they're part of it. But they're my friends, so we see each other more than often next to the project as well. So,
but you share the profits, you share the credits.
Everybody's paid, yes.
Wonderfully.
So,
I applaud you, because often you see it not like that.
Yes, and it's like, it's also up to the people, of course. One person puts more into it than the other person, of course. But also all the people who are also working on the project, on the set, but also in the post-production, they're all queer, of color, or both.
Okay.
So everybody who is part of the project is part of the subject.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was just about to ask you. For you, it's a very personal project that usually, I don't know in your case, but sometimes it has to do with agency as well, and being able and engaging the other people. Is that an important part for you?
Sorry, can you?
Having the agency to make a project on queer, on extended families, that you actually have to be it and sort of live it, or?
Well, of course, I'm not of color, but I'm queer, so I would definitely be really. If you go and work on a subject you're not part of, you really need to be careful. Sometimes it's not your place to tell the story, but there are some ways you can do it. But then it needs to be a collaboration. And,
exactly.
Yeah, I would never.
Based on fully equal.
I would feel awkward if a straight white male would make a story of queer people. Yeah, I would feel awkward about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Gabriel, what is your take? What is the role of design in a more equal society?
I think on my side I'm mainly looking at education, because I've been working a lot with primary and secondary school, and I'm also like a teacher myself.
So not design education, but basic...
like starting working directly with
real-world education.
With kids and children. But then my role as a designer is thinking of how can we reshape education from within by like designing new tools, methods, and approach. And I think my take on is not so much thinking about how can we bring inclusivity and diversity within the curriculum, but more how can we deconstruct the curriculum itself, and more like also to deconstruct the social interaction happening in the school. So not bringing something from like outside, but really using the school spaces, the interactions to unpack, I would say. And what was your questions?
What the role that design can take. But what strikes me is that the whole debate on inclusiveness, there's a whole new language, new words accordingly to it. If it's such a big topic and it's such a big task, society for the whole of society, that it needs new formulations, new words as well. Does it apply not so much in words, but as new design techniques as well? I mean, your project is, kind of new. I haven't seen a lot of design projects that work with, like kids in elementary school and in a playful way teaching them about equality, about sharing and accepting each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say really depends for everyone. Like, I always start my project with something that is close to me. Like, for example, like in my case, my dad used to work as a sport teacher, so I was very interested from a long time to think of how sport is always a performance of wider social structures. So how sport operate a bit as a mirror of society, and therefore I started to use sport more as a tool in my work, I would say. For designing, and therefore also thinking of how can I use my own body as well as both a design and research tool for designing games and experimentations, experience with people, but it still link a lot to my own fascinations and personal history, which I guess would be the same for you.
Yeah,
using movie.
Yeah, after graduating, I got in touch with film, and I thought this is a great format to tell stories. And now with the fund, I've been able to manage to combine it again with my design background to play with multiple layers of film and graphic design and adding stuff. So I think you will always look in the possibilities that you know and what your capabilities are, and then finding ways to tell the story in your,
So we're back at me at my practice now. At the beginning of the program, but it's because you're also engaging with your own practice, and you sort of design your own design practice to.
But that's also how it starts. Sort of what for me was the main question at Design Academy. So okay, what can I add to the world with a piece of furniture? And that was also the reason why I switched to another department, because I wanted to add something in society, and I felt like by switching I could have more possibilities and also being more stimulated by doing that.
Yeah. So do you maybe also feel that it's your duty to address the topics that you both address, being members of a so-called marginalized community? That's quite a burden, isn't it? Or
also a joy.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think it's also a celebration, also thinking of how you can bring people in your own project, find inspirations, and
because otherwise it feels too negative. Because it's also it's a joy to being queer, and it's a joy being part of this minority in a way, because you feel connected with each other, and you can. It's also you can celebrate that within the project as well, even though it's critical, and also it's maybe it's not for my. I don't feel like my project is critical. It's more showing their stories and showing the beauty of queer people.
Very positive.
Yeah, it's
very positive,
and it's also more to
your project as well. Sorry.
Yeah, it's more to extend the representation of queer people.
Yeah, that's what I like also about design. It's such an accessible medium. It's everywhere. And you can use it. Why not use it to communicate, to translate such so-called heavy or difficult topics like inclusion and so on? I think it's a really cool way to address these things.
Well, there it is. Compliments.
Again.
Yeah, well, like I said, we're drawing to the end of the evening. We've covered the topics, and what the beauty is, we're sort of back at the beginning of the evening. Me and my practice, you sort of designed your own practice. You also have a keen eye on the world with your work as well, because the world starts usually with the other. It can be your neighbor, can be an extended family member, can be the stranger, but that's how we engage. And from there on, the designers we've had at the table, I think they all had a take on the world as well. And, well, Janice, what struck me in one word of the work of these designers at the table, that they're very generous. Do you have like a word or something that you take from this even wow, I've seen these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 designers at the 8 at the table. This is what I take as a little bit like me, we're not the designers, we're just at the table, that you take?
Well, yes, but for you it's not about, again, it's not about taking, it's about giving. And I'm happy to see that you realize that you can use your creativity and your talent for the greater good, instead of only making fun things. And we all like fun and beautiful things, but why not fun and beautiful and meaningful also? And I would like to, not that you need my encouragement, obviously, but I still would like to encourage you to keep on sharpening our minds and our and making the industry better, and keep on blossoming and keep on doing what you do.
Beautiful, beautiful. Sharpening our minds and giving and being generous. I think that applies to all the designers here at the table tonight. Thank you so much. First of everyone at the table, Janice, thank you for being here and sharing your insights.
Thank you for having me.
I think they were also very generous, and they were also sharpening the mind, and you were also giving. That applies to you maybe even the most. Also, Gabriel, thank you so much for being here. Martina, Jonas, who were at your side earlier on, Roos. Renee, of course, Audrey, also at that side of the table, and Irene. We've heard beautiful stories. We've seen young designers who, in a little bit of difficult times, achieved to improve themselves, and with that, improve the world also a little bit. Lastly, I would love to thank the Stimuleringsfonds voor de Creatieve Industrie for promoting these young designers and giving them the opportunity to sharpen our minds and be generous, and also by making this evening possible. Design Digger will be back in January, so next year. I hope you all have a good, cool, and light lockdown. Thank you so much.